Well, good afternoon, everybody. It's Garden of Eden, and welcome. Thank you all for 75 subscribers. I have no idea how that even happened, especially since most of my subscribers came in after I announced I was stopping playing Undertale and Deltarune. So I actually had more subscribers subscribe to me once I said it was done than I ever did when I was actually active with challenges. So like, comment, and subscribe for more me not playing Undertale, I guess, because that seems to be what the people want. But today I thought I'd do something a little bit different in that I've come to show off my collection. You could probably see by my gesturing hands. I do have gloves on. That's for good reason. I've taken some of these out of storage. Some of them are delicate. Some of them are sealed, and I don't want smudges. I don't want any marks on them if I can help it. And hopefully this is informative and not just a boring showing off of my collection. But I'm going to do the best I can. My uh, camera kind of sucks. We're going to work with it. So coming in at number 10 is Fatal Fury Special. That's on the Sega CD. So if any of you are unfamiliar with Fatal Fury Special Edition, it's basically the fighting action that an action game that used to see a bit on the arcade. It was kind of fun back in the day when I was playing it. But the reason I own it, aside from the fact that I have the entire North American Sega CD collection, so you'll see other games shortly from that collection. It's because the story that's interesting about this is how I acquired it. I found it by not even looking for it. I was looking for something entirely unrelated game-wise on an eBay sellers, on an Amazon sellers page, and that Amazon sellers page linked to their eBay, and that eBay linked to this. The thing that was interesting is that it wasn't named properly. It had a misspelled name. It didn't indicate it was for the Sega CD. I think it might have had Fatal, it might have had Fury, but it didn't. It had some words missing. So anybody who's trying to look for this on purpose would never find it. So I found this in 2020. The seller was asking $75. They were listing probably hundreds, thousands of gaming items across their different stores, Amazon, eBay, etc. They didn't have time to constantly update anything. In 2020, the average completed sale for this game was about $250 to $300. So I saw a complete inbox for 75 that was not named properly, and I jumped on it and bought it. Right now, as of the more recent completed sales and listings, one for 450, one for about 600. In 2022's climate, you could probably get realistically about $500 or so for it, and I think it would sell. It's not a game that populates on eBay very often, so it's something that will probably sell if you kind of put it somewhere in the middle. Maybe if you put it on the high end, somebody will ask it, but it comes in at number 10 on my list right now. Number 9 is Popful Mail. Popful Mail was one of 4 working design games that was released on the Sega CD. They released Lunar, the Silver Star, Lunar Eternal Blue, Popful Mail, and Vi. So three of the 4 of those games were actual RPGs, bona fide RPGs. This was like an action adventure type of game. It had it was more or less kind of like a side scroller with different weapon abilities that you could have, different party members you could switch between, and it featured, of course, iconic Working Designs voice actors and occasional toilet humor because Working Designs is pretty famous for that. This game I actually did stream. It was the first Sega CD game I ever streamed. So when I was starting my collection, this was one of the first games I ever bought. And it was one of the first games I streamed, and I enjoyed it. Right now, it's sitting at around 550 US dollars, complete in box, and that's kind of where we're at with that one. So that's number 9. Number 8 is Rule of Rose. Rule of Rose is a very interesting game for a number of reasons. Number one is it's a horror game. And in general, horror games tend to have cult followings, and they tend to be pretty high priced if they become collectible for that very reason. Several Silent Hill games, several of other games that were on this on PS2, especially PS2 horror for some reason tends to be very pricey. But what's interesting about Rule of Rose is its controversy. The thing is, a lot of people may not be familiar with the ESRB and how it came about with several games such as Night Trap and Mortal Kombat. But what was interesting about this game is that there was a lot of controversy before the game was even released, just based off of the trailer, the frightening imagery, and I guess misconceptions with what actually happened in the game. People in the United Kingdom lobbied heavily against this game even being released, and it was banned before it even hit the shelves. And it was banned based off of misinformation. And that in turn hurt it getting localized by most conventional means here in the States. Atlas USA published this game, probably recognize them if you're a Persona fan, but they localized and published Rule of Rose, very limited release, very limited quantities. And when people are told that it's a game that's so controversial that it wasn't even played in other places, people go out of their way to play it and find out why, or people go out of their way to own it just to own it. And so I did stream this game along with Quan and Haunting Grounds earlier in, I believe it was either in 2020 or 2021, and I played it to completion. It was an all right game. I wouldn't pay what I paid for it. I bought it for $399. It's retailing, sold listings right now tend to be about 650. So it's coming in around 8th place. Coming in at 7th is actually my first sealed copy of a game. I have Solado Robo factory sealed. It's a Nintendo DS game that could only be sold in one of these giant boxes. It's bundled with the soundtrack as well as the game case for a DS, and it's basically original music CD soundtrack. It has 24 tracks as advertised on the back. Xseed Games published it. CyberConnect 2 were the developers of this game. They also made the other games in the Little Tale series, which included Tale Concerto on the PS1, which didn't quite make it on my top 10 list, but it is about 350 bucks right now. And they're also playing the game. They also developed the game I'm playing right now, which is Fuga, Melodies of Steel. But this game I actually played earlier in the year. I actually played Solado Robo earlier this year, but it was my non-factory sealed copy. I actually own this game in two methods: factory sealed and non-factory sealed. There actually have been, within the last couple of months, several factory sealed copies of this sold, and right now it's put around $650 to $700. But if you see a loose cart, probably expect to pay around upwards of $200 for it without the case, without the manual, and certainly without the soundtrack. But complete in box, non-sealed, expect to pay probably close to around $450 for it. I do recommend it, though. It's a fun action adventure game. The combat's pretty simplistic, but it kind of gets a little bit muddled around the second part. I made an entire review about it. I'm not going to get into it here. Watch that if you're more interested about it. So coming in at number 6 is a game I mentioned earlier. It's Quan. This is the PlayStation 2. It's from Agitech published it. The company behind it all, you might recognize. It's From Software. Uh, if you shorten their name, you get FromSoft, which is very familiar with people that may be fans of the Dark Souls series. They actually worked on several games, Echo Knight Beyond, which happens to be sitting on my shelf up there, as well as Quan. So Quan's another horror game, but it was a very clunky type of combat. I felt the game was too easy because you could kind of recover your sanity and stamina pretty easily without any real punishment. And so, even on the hardest difficulty, it wasn't really hard. It had very good atmosphere, but it just played very strange. I don't know what it was about PS2 horror games, but a lot of them just couldn't get a lot of the mechanics right. If you are looking to really purchase or buy, it's probably around $700 right now. I got this game probably around 450. So I'm still doing okay on my purchase from 2020. Now, number five happens to be a game I just played not that long ago. This is Panzer Dragoon Saga on the Sega Saturn. So, Panzer Dragoon Saga is the only RPG in the Panzer series, and it was released on the Sega Saturn. And it was one of the games that was really interesting in its combat because you had some dynamic movement you could do. It was more like a shooter, but it was also it was like a shooter in that you could have your dragon attack things or maneuvering your dragon to advantageous positions. But it was also an RPG. So I found that its combat and everything else was really, really interesting. And the thing about this game is that while Panzer Dragoon, the original game, got multiple uh, re-releases on, Switch, on Steam, on multiple consoles, and I think they even had a limited release of all things. So they were one of the games that got a limited run release. Panzer Dragoon Saga, unfortunately, its source code has been lost. So this game from way back when, from over 25 years ago, is probably never going to get a remaster. Is probably never going to get a re-release. And so the only way to play this is probably through this means. I paid about $990 for it. Right now, it's settling around 1050 to 1100. It's probably, going to fluctuate a little bit for a while. It's at where I got it, and it's probably not something I'd want to sell through eBay because they're going to take 12% and their shipping and everything else. But if there's a trustworthy, buyer locally, I would certainly let it off my hands for maybe a little bit of an extra profit. So that's Panzer Dragoon Saga. Coming in at number four is Magic Knight Ray Earth, or as I like to call it when I was trying to stream it, Magic Knight Pray It Works, because I kept having problems with my Saturn. This is this is not just one of the last. It is the last Sega Saturn game that we got in North America. Working Designs took so long on localizing this game. It happens to be the last one. They lost a lot of localization progress along the way. I happen to really like this game. The art is charming. It has multiple different means of displaying art. It has cutscenes. It has scenes like you're looking at an actual anime. It also has very colorful sprite work, and they did a lot of good job with the localization and I would say some of the music. But overall, there's a ton of voice acting in this. The gameplay is its only real downside. It's a very boring, plain action adventure type of game. It's kind of got some Zelda-like elements in some of the dungeons and puzzling that you have to do, and some of the abilities that you gain later on. But combat was never really entertaining, but everything else around the game was. I got this game for about $850. Right now, it's settling around 1150 at this particular time. So not a bad uptick in its price recently. Coming up next, for all of you anime fans, is Spider-Man Web of Fire. Oh, actually, it says Web of Fire. And so Spider-Man Web of Fire is one of only 34 games in the entire world that were released on the 32X. So the 32X had a ridiculously diminished library compared to the Genesis and compared to the Sega CD. Uh, and to compare how minuscule this library is, the Virtual Boy, which was Nintendo's colossal failure, had 22 games across all the continents that were released. So the Sega 32X only got 12 more games in its library than the Virtual Boy did before the Virtual Boy went kaput. So this game is right now the most high-priced game that happens to be on the 32X. This is the only game I've showcased so far that I have not played. I have not been able to play this game because my 32X is broken, and so I cannot play it to showcase any of the gameplay to anybody. I was gonna play Knuckles Chaotix to kind of break in the 32X, but this game I was never able to get to work, and it was a real shame. But right now, I got this game complete in box for about $1,100. It has every single insert possible that there is to have in this. Right now, there's an active listing for $2,100. I don't think that's realistically what it's ever going to sell for. I've seen sold listings go anywhere between 1,100 to 1,400 right now. So I'm placing it higher than Panzer and Ray Earth for the time being, just because I think with complete inbox, all inserts, it's going to probably yield on the higher end if I were to sell it off right now. Now, coming in at number 2 and number 1 are both games from my Sega CD collection. And coming in at number 2 is Snatcher for the Sega CD. So Snatcher is a Hideo Kojima game, for those of you who may be Metal Gear fans, fans from other genres of games that Hideo Kojima might have been affiliated with. And so this was a game that flopped, pretty hard on its release, and it was only later that it gained more of a cult following. And this game is probably one of the most ambitious games. It's one of the best looking games. I believe it was a 95 release. And the thing about this game is that it never, ever, ever got another North American release. But Guard, what about the Mini? The Mini has Snatcher on it with TurboGrafx and everything else. No, the Mini actually does not have this version of Snatcher. The Mini that all of you may know and love happens to have the Japanese version. It is completely untranslated. It is completely in Japanese. The Japanese version has had re-release after re-release after re-release. Snatcher North America English has never had one. And at this particular point, probably never will. The only way to play English North American Snatcher is on the Sega CD. Now, at this point in time, I got this copy for about $800. The particular copy I'm holding in my hand is special for a number of reasons. Number one, it has the registration card. I know that seems kind of silly and hokey to just point out randomly it has a registration card, because, like, how rare is that? Well, most Sega CD games that have the registration card actually have them affixed inside of the instruction manual, meaning there's very little chance of you losing it unless you tear it off and mail it in, or you just lose the instruction manual. It's harder to misplace that as a result. With the Sega CD Snatcher registration card, it was loose. It was a cardboard copy that was kind of that had orange and white stripes, and it was harder. It was harder to keep it. In fact, if you go through a lot of the Snatcher listings on eBay when they would go up, maybe 1 out of every 10 might actually have the registration card. 9 out of 10 that are advertised as being complete aren't actually complete. It's hard to do a two-finger quote mark when you're wearing these gloves, by the way. Fun fact. And so this game I got for $800. There are no active listings on eBay right now. None. The last couple of sold listings have been around $1,600, $1,700. And fun fact, I own not one, not two. I'm going to put these away because these are the ones that have the registration cards. Not 3, not 4, not 5, but 6 copies. 6 copies of Snatcher on the Sega CD. And so some of you may be wondering, why the hell do I have 6 copies? I knew it was going to go up. I knew Snatcher was one of the games that was going to go up in price. It wasn't probably going to go up right away, but it was one of the games that was always competing with KO Flying Squadron as being one of the 2 most expensive games on the Sega CD. And KO Flying Squadron was always ahead of it by a wide margin. And the margin just kept getting wider, and I figured eventually the Snatcher copies would be doing the same thing. So I used to have 5 copies, and then I sold the 5th copy for 2,000. This was, I think, over a year ago. I had it in one of those cases, those acrylic cases to protect it, and this was back when regular copies were 800. So I used the 2,000 and I bought 2 more copies because that's what you do, right? And so I had, instead of having 5, I just went to 4, and then I had 6. And so I have no idea what the one I have with the registration card plus the original sales receipt from where the seller bought it from. I don't know how much I can get for that because I guarantee you nobody has the original sales receipt from when they actually bought Snatcher. So that I don't know what that could possibly yield, but it can also be, it's probably going to be very, very high. Um, Coming in as an honorable mention for number 1, because I honestly don't know where to place this. I have in my hand a sealed lenticular copy of Xenosaga Episode 3. So the thing that makes this so rare is that you could only get this game if you pre-ordered from Best Buy. This 2006 RPG, you could only get if you pre-ordered from Best Buy the lenticular cover. The lenticular cover, anyway. And so what's interesting about this is that A, you'd have to have enough of an interest to pre-order the game from Best Buy, and B, despite having that much interest to go ahead and pre-order the game, you'd have to then not open it. So the lenticular version is much more rare, and it's even more rare to find it sealed. What's what's distinctly difficult about this game to really price is that when you look at WADA listings that are on eBay right now, one of them's like $2,300, like a 9.2, and another one of them is like a 9 point, or excuse me, one of them is $3,000 and one of them is $2,000. But there's not been a single graded copy that's sold, and so I really don't have any incentive to sell this copy. Or really degrade this copy for sale because there doesn't seem to be a market for graded copies right now for this. So I'm gonna save the money for right now, but it is an honorable mention. I want to just let you know what the active listing say, but I really don't have any interest in grading it right now for the reasons I mentioned. Coming in at number 1, I've already hinted at it quite strongly because of what I've mentioned about Snatcher and what was competing with it. Number 1 is Tail Flying Squadron on the Sega CD. This is the most expensive game that happens to be on the Sega CD, and it's the most expensive game. When I purchased this game, I spent 2,000 on it. I bought this in the year 2020 for 2,000. Thankfully, I didn't pay 2020 for 2020 KO, but it is a game that I played exactly once ever because I just was afraid of damaging the disc or exposing it to the elements. It is the hallmark of my CD collection. It's bounced around a bit in price. The highest I've seen it sold for was 4,000, and the most recent sale price for a auction listing was about $3,000. So I can probably get, after eBay takes its huge cut, and after I insure this for for transport and everything else, I might get a $400 profit off of this if I were to sell this, insure it for everything it's worth, and after eBay takes its immense profit cut from me. So I still did well for my $2,000 purchase, all things considered, and I'm probably going to hold on to it for a while. I've only had it for like 2 years right now. I'm in no hurry to sell this, and I'm immensely happy with it. If I sell this, I'd really have to start selling the rest of the collection. But that is everything I have as far as the top 10 list. Did any of you like anything that was on this list? Do any of you own any of the games on this list, or do you have games that are more pricey than what I've got? I'm interested in hearing what you got to say below. Thank you all for watching, and have a good rest of your day.